the Chinese are incredibly exploitative. Maybe they talk about Africa and...
I'm sorry about that. I don't know why it's happening.
And then the other is the Chinese.
Use one mic and pass it between you.
Are we from the one? Are we from the?
Thanks. I think both are simplistic and tend to overlook the fact that the Chinese encroachment into markets around the world has been entirely in line with what Western companies and countries have done over the last 30 or 40 years. They set up businesses, they extract resources, they don't employ much local labour, they do deals with governments that are in the interests of a small or narrow elite and themselves. They may build a little bit of infrastructure, but much of it doesn't really provide for the majority of the population. I don't think China are an alternative. I don't think they're any better or worse than what Western countries are doing in many developing countries in the world. In fact, the evidence I've seen is they're doing exactly what is done by other countries. And that's not, I think, surprising given that they're working within a global system and competing in a global marketplace. Does that answer your question?
So will it help, worsen, or won't make a difference?
I think it's the same trajectory as what we're seeing. The only difference, I guess, and this is where foreign policy people come in, is that it's probably heightening the tensions between countries in terms of the race for resources between the US, China, Russia and other global powers for influence in the region. But in terms of actually having an impact at the level of the everyday, I don't think it makes much difference whatsoever. Whether it's a Chinese company or a multinational that has its headquarters in New York.
Hi, Ken Davis. Can I talk without a mic?
Yeah, go. Yeah.
Just two quick questions. One, do you want to talk about the climate crisis, particularly in relation to water, and how that fuels conflict in the North Africa, West Asia region? And the second is Turkey's increasing power and the current dynamics in relation to the Arabic-speaking countries.
Again, I think with the water and the climate issue, it certainly is intense in the Middle East, but again, it's part of a global problem, and I don't know what the figures are for many other parts of the world, but what I've seen recently suggests that the water shortages in many Middle Eastern countries are no greater or worse proportionally than they are in other parts of the world that have been affected by climate change dramatically. So sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Latin America, Asia, and people have been talking about the next resource war. I think for about 30 years people have been saying the next resource war in the Middle East will be over water. Well, it's still over oil and